My child, what you are reading right now is not an accident, and it is no accident that your finger paused right here, because at this exact moment, when you thought this was just another stream of words, something has shifted in the unseen realms, and you can feel it inside you as that subtle pressure, that quiet vibration, that restlessness you can't quite name. You're wondering whether it's fear or curiosity, but the truth is, it's recognition. Your spirit recognizes that it has been called. I know your mind is already searching for logic, for a reason to dismiss this, for a way out, but listen. Just listen, because you are among the very few for whom this veil has been lifted. 7 seconds ago, your name was registered again in heaven, not for erasure, but for review. And 12 hours ago, a decision that was left unfinished is still hanging in the air. You can't see it, but you can feel its weight, which is why your breathing feels heavier, why your eyes feel tired, why exhaustion follows you even when you don't understand why. This is not weariness without cause. You have been standing in a war for years, a battlefield that cannot be seen. And every time you said, "Not now," every time you postponed your calling until tomorrow, every time you chose noise over my voice, a mark was made. Not punishment, a record. No one taught you that every choice echoes, and now that echo surrounds you. You believe your life is ordinary, your tiredness normal, your restlessness no different from everyone else's. But if you were truly ordinary, there would be no need to distract you so intensely. If you were insignificant, you would not be offered so much comfort, so much numbness, so convincing an illusion of everything is fine. Pressure is not on you because you are weak, but because there is something inside you that darkness cannot afford to leave undisturbed. That is why stillness makes you uneasy, why memories surface when you slow down, why your dreams feel like battles you can't fully remember. You tell yourself it's just stress, but you don't realize how many times you have stood without waking, how many times you considered giving up and still saw the next morning. Every time you rose, another page was written. I'm not here to condemn you, but to shake you awake, because compassion without truth becomes a sweet poison, and truth without compassion becomes a hammer. So hear this. The time is still moving. It is not frozen. It is not waiting. You can ignore this and move on as you have before. But every time you walk forward and leave me behind, something else is left behind with me. Peace you later call lost. Passion you later call burnout. Purpose you later call confusion. You ask what your calling is, what your purpose is, and then you run from those very questions because answers demand responsibility. Responsibility demands sacrifice, and sacrifice threatens your comfort. You are trained to believe comfort is safety, busyness is importance, and distraction is life itself. But your spirit knows that isn't true, and that is why it resists, why it grows tired, why it sends you questions in the silence of night that you drown out in the noise of day. Then you say I'm silent, that there are no signs when the signs are everywhere. In numbers, in timing, in thoughts that return again and again, in words that grip you repeatedly, in opportunities you keep postponing. And now, in this moment, this message itself is one of those signs. Not a threat, not a demand, just a mirror. And if you truly look into it, you will see the person you could become and the person you are slowly becoming. The distance between those two shifts every day, great collapses don't happen in a single moment. They are built through small compromises, and great awakenings don't arrive all at once either. They begin in moments like this, when someone stops, when someone says, I heard, when someone accepts that they are not just another face in the crowd, and right now, that moment is standing in front of you, undecorated, unsoftened. Because what is valuable is rarely light, and what is true is rarely comfortable. So if your heart is beating a little faster, if it feels like something is being asked of you without words, this is not imagination. This is a calling, and whether you listen to it or turn away from it, that choice is in your hands. And now that you know the choice rests with you, feel how the air around that choice tightens, because choices are never weightless, even when they look small. Time does not announce when it is thinning. It simply begins to slip through your hands faster, and you notice it only when something you assumed would wait quietly disappears without noise. That is where you are standing now, not at the beginning of something, not at the end, but at the narrowing, the space where delays stop being neutral. You have postponed many things before and survived, so you taught yourself that postponement is harmless, but there is a moment when delay stops being patience and becomes erosion. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. You don't lose everything at once. You lose sharpness, you lose clarity, you lose the ability to tell the difference between warning and comfort, and that is more dangerous than loss itself. You feel the pressure increasing because the window is not as wide as it once was. Not because I am rushing you, but because reality is converging. Paths that once ran parallel are beginning to intersect, and intersections demand decisions. This is why your inner conflict has sharpened. Your conscience no longer whispers, it interrupts. Your distractions no longer satisfy, they only delay the discomfort. Your soul and your logic are no longer cooperating the way they used to. One is asking questions your mind cannot answer, and the other is offering excuses your spirit no longer believes. This friction is not a flaw, it is a signal. When alignment is possible, tension appears first. You have noticed memories returning lately. Unfinished conversations, abandoned ideas, moments when you almost stepped forward and didn't. They are not coming back to shame you. They are resurfacing because unresolved things always resurface when time compresses. Opportunities do not vanish. They retreat, and retreat is quieter than loss. That is why you didn't notice when some doors stopped responding to your knock. You assumed silence meant later, when in truth it meant not this way. Still, you keep knocking with the same habits, the same patterns, the same assumptions, and you wonder why nothing opens the way it once did. There are consequences you sense but cannot yet name. You feel them as hesitation when you should feel conviction, as fatigue where there should be resolve. This is not punishment, it is exposure. The distance between who you are becoming and who you are meant to be is beginning to show itself, and distance always reveals itself as discomfort before it reveals itself as loss. That is why this moment feels heavier than others. You are no longer deciding in theory. You are deciding in momentum. You have told yourself many times that you will change when circumstances change, but circumstances respond to alignment, not intention. The order has always been reversed. That is why waiting feels safer than moving, even though waiting costs more than you realize. Every time you delay, something else steps into the space where courage should have been. It looks harmless, routine, entertainment, rationalization, but it trains you. Not all training is visible. Some of it simply teaches you what to ignore. You're beginning to understand something most people never confront. That neutrality is not a resting place. It is a slope. And slopes always move in one direction, even when you think you are standing still. That is why standing still feels exhausting now. You're working to remain undecided. You are spending energy maintaining ambiguity, and that energy was meant for movement. Listen closely, not for instructions, but for recognition. You have been here before, not in detail, but in essence. Moments where everything could have shifted if you had responded differently. You remember how you walked away telling yourself it didn't matter. You were wrong, but not irreparably. Still, repetition carries a cost. Patterns do not punish you, they eventually define you, and definition, once settled, is harder to undo than you think. This is why the urgency feels unfamiliar. It is not panic, it is clarity approaching a deadline. You are not being forced, but you are being confronted with your habits, your fears, your unfinished obedience. What you do next will not just determine what opens, it will determine what no longer tries to open at all. You sense the doorway because it does not look dramatic. It looks ordinary. Choices that matter most rarely announce themselves as destiny. They arrive disguised as inconvenience, discomfort, interruption. That is how they bypass pride and test sincerity. And right now, sincerity is being tested, not by what you say you believe, but by what you are willing to interrupt to respond. You're closer than you think and farther than you feel. Both can be true at the same time. That is why this moment cannot be explained away or repeated later with the same weight. Some moments do not return in the same form because they were designed to meet you only once, when you are exactly this version of yourself, aware enough to recognize them, uncertain enough to still choose. Do you notice how quiet everything becomes right before something irreversible happens? Not silent in the world, but silent inside you. The noise doesn't stop. You do. This is that kind of quiet. The kind that doesn't ask for attention but demands honesty. You're standing in it now, and your instincts are trying to rush you out because stillness exposes what motion hides. You have mastered movement. You have learned how to stay busy, how to stay occupied, how to stay useful enough that no one asks what you're avoiding. But usefulness is not the same as alignment, and motion is not the same as direction. This pause is not accidental. It is interruption by design. You have reached the stage where consequences no longer arrive loudly. They arrive subtly, through dullness, through hesitation, through a growing sense that you are slightly out of place in your own life. Nothing has collapsed, yet nothing feels solid. That is not confusion, that is dissonance. Your outer life has continued forward, but your inner life has stalled, and the gap between them is beginning to stretch. Gaps always widen before they break. There are things you once felt clearly that now feel distant, not because they left you, but because you stepped away slowly enough to convince yourself you were still close. Distance does not announce itself, it normalizes itself. That is why you didn't panic when clarity faded. You adapted. Humans are excellent at adapting to misalignment. You learned how to function without resonance, how to operate without conviction, how to live without listening. But survival is not the same as living in truth. You are beginning to feel the cost of all the moments you told yourself you would return later. Later has a way of becoming never, not dramatically, but quietly. Doors do not slam shut in the unseen. They simply stop responding. And when you finally notice, you assume the silence is rejection, when in reality it is timing exhausted. Timing is not infinite. Opportunity is patient, but it is not careless. Your conscience has become sharper because it has less room to negotiate. Excuses that once worked no longer carry weight. You can still make them, but you no longer believe them. This is the stage where many people harden, not because they are evil, but because softness becomes inconvenient. Awareness demands response, and response demands change. Change threatens the structures you built to feel safe. So the temptation now is not to rebel, but to numb, to dull the edge of knowing, to choose familiarity over truth. You are closer to defining yourself than you realize. Not by declaration, but by repetition. Identity is not decided in moments of inspiration. It is decided in patterns, and patterns, once reinforced, begin to feel like inevitability. This is why this moment feels heavier than the ones before it. You are no longer choosing actions. You are choosing trajectories. Pay attention to what feels fragile right now. Fragility is not weakness, it is exposure. When something is exposed, it can either heal or scar. Both processes begin the same way, by being touched. Avoidance delays both, but it does not cancel either. The pressure you feel is not force, it is proximity. You're too close to pretend neutrality still exists. You have noticed how quickly time seems to move lately. Days blur, weeks compress. That sensation is not imagination. When decision points approach, perception shifts. You feel time accelerating because you are running out of margin, not minutes. Margin is what allows mistakes without consequence. Margin is what allows delay without cost. And margin is what is quietly thinning. This is where many people misinterpret what is happening. They assume urgency means panic. It does not. Panic is chaotic. This is precise. This is focused. This is the narrowing of options that occurs when life begins to respond to who you are becoming rather than who you intend to be. Intentions speak. Patterns shout. You are not being watched the way you fear. You are being witnessed. There is a difference. Watching implies suspicion. Witnessing implies recognition. What you do with recognition determines whether it becomes affirmation or indictment. Not in a courtroom sense, but in an internal one. You already feel the trial inside you, the arguments, the defenses, the rationalizations. The verdict is not coming from outside, it is forming within. You are tempted to look for reassurance, for signs that everything will remain flexible, that you can still drift a little longer without consequence. That temptation itself is a signal. It reveals what you already suspect. Deep down, you know that drifting has brought you here, and drifting further will not bring you somewhere new, only somewhere quieter, duller, harder to leave. The future you sense but cannot see is not threatening you. It is waiting to see if you will meet it awake or asleep. Awareness changes the nature of arrival. Two people can reach the same place and experience entirely different realities depending on whether they arrived consciously or by default. Default is easier. Default requires nothing from you, but default always decides for you. You are being asked, not commanded, not coerced, to notice what you are doing with your attention. Attention is currency. Whatever holds it trains you. Whatever you repeatedly give it to shapes you. This is why distraction is not harmless. It is formative. Over time, it teaches you what not to feel, what not to question, what not to confront. And eventually, it teaches you how to avoid yourself. You have outgrown some of the things you are still clinging to. That is why they feel heavier now. What once supported you is beginning to restrain you. Growth always creates this tension. The question is not whether you feel it. The question is whether you will interpret it correctly. Many people mistake restraint for safety and release for danger, and so they choose the familiar cage over the unknown field. You are not being rushed, but you are being narrowed toward honesty. The version of you that could remain undecided indefinitely is dissolving. Not because you are failing, but because you are approaching clarity. Clarity is inconvenient before it is empowering. It strips away plausible deniability. Once you see, you are responsible for what you do with what you see. Notice how your inner language has changed. You no longer say someday with the same confidence. You no longer promise yourself things without feeling a slight ache. That ache is not regret. It is recognition catching up to delay. It is the awareness that potential untreated becomes pressure. This moment does not demand perfection. It demands presence. Presence is costly because it removes escape routes. When you are present, you cannot claim ignorance. You cannot blame timing. You cannot hide behind noise. That is why presence feels dangerous to a life built on postponement. You are not being asked to leap blindly. You are being asked to stop pretending you don't see the edge. Pretending requires effort. Seeing does not. The exhaustion you feel is not from carrying too much responsibility. It is from carrying too many unresolved decisions. What happens next does not need to be named yet. Some outcomes are heavier when unnamed. Names make things manageable. This is not meant to be manageable yet. It is meant to be felt, to sit with, to acknowledge without neutralizing. Stay here for a moment longer. Do not rush to interpret. Do not rush to conclude. The weight you feel is not here to crush you. It is here to anchor you. Anchors are only frightening when you are addicted to drifting. And the fact that you are still here, still reading, still resisting the urge to minimize what you feel, that alone tells you something you have been trying not to admit. You have grown skilled at offering me what costs you nothing. The quiet leftovers at the end of your day. The fragments of attention that remain after everything else has been fed. But understand this clearly. I do not compete for scraps. I'm not interested in the margins of your life. I do not wait patiently for exhaustion to hand me whatever is left. I'm not a convenience you schedule around comfort. I'm the center you orbit, or I am not present at all. Half-hearted devotion is not humility. It is avoidance dressed up as spirituality. You are taught that sincerity is enough, that intention carries the same weight as obedience. It does not. Intention without action only soothes the conscience long enough to delay transformation. You have mistaken tolerance for acceptance, patience for permission. You assumed that because nothing collapsed immediately, nothing mattered urgently. But there are losses that do not announce themselves with explosions. They arrive as dullness, as delay, as a slow erosion of reverence until sacred things feel ordinary and ordinary things feel sufficient. You speak my name easily now, too easily, without pause, without weight, without awareness of who you are addressing. Once people washed their mouths before invoking me. Once they trembled before speaking. Now you summon me casually, like background noise, like a resource to be accessed rather than a presence to be honored. You have not lost belief. You have lost awe. And when awe disappears, wisdom follows it out the door. Do you know why awe matters? Because awe keeps you aligned with reality. I am not scaled to your comfort. You are scaled to my holiness. When that order reverses, confusion multiplies. You begin to assume I exist to support your plans instead of realizing your breath exists because I allow it. You forget that power preceded permission. You forget that love does not eliminate authority, it defines it. Yet even now, after the casual dismissals, the delayed obedience, the years of spiritual multitasking, my regard for you has not cooled. It has intensified. But intensity without preparation destroys what it touches. That is why you experience my presence in measured waves instead of full exposure. Not because I am distant, but because you are fragile. Not weak, unfinished. There is a difference. I do not want your admiration. I want your alignment. I do not want moments. I want direction. I am not asking you to feel more. I am asking you to yield more. Emotion fades quickly. Surrender rewrites trajectories. Listen closely, because what I am saying now is not general. It is precise. There are markers ahead, events that will not blend into coincidence. You will recognize them not because they impress you, but because they confront you. They will touch the exact areas you have avoided bringing into the light. This is not cruelty. This is mercy with clarity, but clarity demands readiness. You cannot receive what you refuse to make space for. Some things must be removed before others can arrive. You already know what occupies your attention without nourishing your spirit. You already feel the weight of habits that once felt harmless. This is not about restriction. It is about capacity. You cannot carry new life while clinging to what drains you. Your daily rhythms reveal more about your loyalties than your words ever could. What you reach for first trains you. What you prioritize shapes you. What you delay diminishes you. You're not neutral in your routines. You're being formed by them. Understand this about the unseen realm. Movement follows alignment. When you shift priority, forces shift position. When you choose presence over preference, resistance loses leverage. When you obey before you fully understand, pathways open that logic cannot predict. But when you stall, when you negotiate, when you place my voice alongside every other option, you authorize interference. Not symbolically, functionally. This is why certain areas of your life feel contested, why progress feels resisted, why peace feels conditional. You have treated obedience as optional, and the environment around you has responded accordingly. This is not punishment, it is consequence. Systems respond to order. Do not assume love cancels consequence. Love explains why consequence exists at all. Without it, nothing would matter enough to correct. There are stories unfolding around you right now that you will never hear in full. Lives altered because someone responded when it was inconvenient. Lives stalled because someone delayed when it mattered. These are not myths. These are patterns. You are not immune to them. Some people recognized their moment and acted with trembling hands. Others felt the same weight and chose comfort instead. Both choices felt small at the time. Neither remained small. Heaven does not force outcomes. It responds to posture. Availability attracts assignment. Readiness invites responsibility. When you make yourself reachable, movement follows. When you remain guarded, opportunity passes quietly to someone else willing to carry the weight you refused. Do not romanticize delay. It rarely feels dramatic. It feels reasonable. It feels justified. It feels safe. That is why it is dangerous. You are not being asked to fix everything. You are being asked to stop pretending nothing is wrong. Awareness precedes change. Honesty precedes healing. Reverence precedes wisdom. This moment is not theatrical. It is surgical. It is not here to overwhelm you. It is here to expose what must be addressed before it calcifies into identity. Notice how your heart responds when you consider doing nothing. That resistance you feel is not peace. It is fear of disruption. Peace does not avoid truth. It rests in it. There is more at stake here than personal improvement. What moves through you affects what comes after you. Generational momentum does not begin with children. It begins with choices made when no one is watching. You're standing inside a larger story than you realize. Others have stood where you stand. Some responded quickly. Their lives did not become easier, but they became clearer. Others postponed. Their lives did not collapse, but they narrowed. Both paths felt survivable. Only one led somewhere. You do not need louder signs. You need quieter honesty. The question is not whether you have heard enough. The question is whether you are willing to respond without guarantees. Heaven is attentive, not anxious, not desperate. Attentive. There is a difference. What unfolds next depends less on what is offered and more on what is received. Stay with this weight a moment longer. Do not rush to relieve it. Some pressures are meant to focus, not crush. This is one of them. You are closer to the threshold than you think, and further from neutrality than you feel.